Greetings, my friend. Welcome to the next episode of the Red Delta Project podcast, helping you maximize your potential with minimalist approaches to diet and exercise. I'm Matt Schifferly, founder of the Red Delta Project. Today's episode, we're talking about what is the topic of my latest book, Overcoming Isometrics. Specifically, what are some of the massive advantages of overcoming isometrics and helping you build as much muscle and strength as possible. But before we jump into that, I wanted to give you a preview of next week's episode where I talk about intuitive or freestyle training, essentially working out without having a very strict, structured workout plan. It's something that I've implemented over the past several months, been working out fantastic for me, one of the best things I ever did. And I get a lot of questions from it, so I'll be telling you about my experience and answering a lot of those questions in next week's episode. So make sure to subscribe, notified, all that sort of thing, so that way you don't miss the episode on intuitive and freestyle training. So we're talking building muscle and strength with overcoming isometrics. Overcoming isometrics, just to quickly recap, that means you're pushing or pulling against an unyielding force. It's not like yielding isometrics where you have a given level of resistance, like if you're holding a dumbbell out in front of you and you have a set level of resistance that you're working against. Instead, you're pushing or pulling against something that can't move, so the amount of force you're generating and the level of resistance coming back at you is always equal. When I talk about overcoming isometrics to people, I'm often met with a lot of skepticism, which I can't blame anybody. I was very skeptical myself. And especially because a lot of people will say, well, how in the world can you possibly stand a chance of building muscle and strength if you're not even moving? Well, what if I told you that that movement of dynamic exercise, not only is that not necessarily a valuable asset for building muscle and strength, but it actually may be a liability that's been holding you back? To understand why, let's get back down to the fundamental principles of what makes your training effective for physical adaptation. Now, when you get down to it, it's not about weight and reps and sets and what's your workout plan. That stuff is more superficial. Instead, you need three things in an effective workout plan. One is some way to generate as much tension as possible in your muscle. That's where your strength comes from. More tension, more strength. They're synonymous with one another. Two is you need to be able to use that tension for a good period of time. This is one of the primary stimulants for building muscle, because the more you use the energy substrates or the fuel in the muscles, as it were, the more you trigger the muscles to say, hey, I need you to get bigger, build a bigger fuel tank, in other words. And then, of course, the third thing is recovery. You can only train as hard as you recover. So we want to maximize tension, we want to maximize time, and we want to maximize recovery. So when it comes to building strength, we need to be able to put a lot of tension into the muscle progressively over time. One of the biggest barriers to this, of course, is the mind-muscle connection, because the only thing putting tension in a muscle is your brain. Weights don't do it, your workout and your exercises, that stuff is like the vehicle, but ultimately the path you travel to put the tension there is your brain creates a signal, goes through your nervous system, and makes the muscle contract. Unfortunately, a lot of us are coming to the table with terribly deconditioned neural inputs. So no matter what exercise you're doing and no matter what you're trying to do in the gym, if your brain has trouble talking to your muscles, which is very common, nothing you do can possibly work just because you can't put a lot of tension in the muscle. But one of the great things about overcoming isometrics is it reconditions that neural connection very quickly. Let me put it to you this way. I've known about the importance of neural conditioning for years now, largely because I've had poor neural conditioning for almost everything. And I've used exercises from therapists and chiropractors and stuff with hit or miss results that have taken a while to implement. Now, at the time I found Overcoming Isometrics, I'd been working on trying to engage my hips better for the better part of 2 or 3 years. And once I started using some simple hip overcoming isometric exercises, I made far more progress in less than a week than I had in the previous 2 to 3 years prior. So let that sink in for a bit. More progress in a week than in 2 years. That's how powerful it is. And largely because overcoming isometrics is one of the safest, easiest, and most effective ways at reconstituting that mind-muscle connection. So instead of giving your muscles tension in little droplets, it's just this deluge of neural input, which allows you to put so much more tension into your muscles a hell of a lot faster and easier. And once you get that connection going, your ability to put a lot of tension in the muscle skyrockets. And this is due to the simple force velocity curve. It's a simple basic principle of muscle physiology. The more tension you have in your muscles, the less you can move. This is why, like in Taekwondo, if you want to be fast and agile and able to move easily, you need to be very relaxed and use tension very sparingly. But if you're trying to move a very heavy object, like pushing a car out of a ditch, you're not going very fast because you have so much tension being generated, you can only move slowly. So naturally, the way to generate maximum tension is something you're not moving with at all. So when you're trying to push or pull against an unyielding force, that gives your neural system, your nervous system, the ability to maximize the amount of tension there as much as humanly possible. This opens the door to all sorts of things like neural synergy. So all your muscles are working together, so nothing's holding it back. Isolating a muscle tends to weaken it. You also have the ability to engage far more type 2 muscle fibers, which are responsible for a lot of your strength, but also hypertrophy as well. Not to mention, all of this makes maximizing that tension very easy, safe, and effective, or accessible. Because if you had a heavy barbell, you're like, I'm going to work up to a lot of tension, you need a lot of support, you need really good technique, you need a lot of practice, you need to warm up. Being able to generate that much tension in a muscle safely and consistently, you got to know what you're doing. But with overcoming isometrics, you just grab and let it rip. It takes a fraction of the skill and technical know-how, which means you now have a hell of a lot of an easier, faster, and more effective way of generating a lot more tension in the muscle, therefore building a lot more strength. All right, so we got the tension thing. What about time? Well, this is another big advantage. A couple of things. One is when we do dynamic exercise, the amount of actual tension in the muscle fluctuates with the exercise. Think of a squat. At the top of a squat, when you're standing there, your muscles don't need to generate that much tension to maintain an upright standing posture. As you get down lower into the squat, you need to generate a lot more tension because the resistance due to mechanical leverage changes at the bottom of the squat, and then you stand back up. So even if you're using a long set, like 20 repetitions, for example, you're only really generating that high level of tension for a fraction of the time of that set. So it's 20 seconds long, but you may only be generating that much tension for a few seconds. Conversely, on overcoming isometrics, you're generating that tension, but you're not moving, so it's constant. So instead of having this waveform and you're peaking with amounts of tension, it's just on, constant. This is one of the reasons why when I give people overcoming isometrics, especially for the legs, they're immediately swearing at me because they think it's going to be easy, it's no big deal. And where they're used to taking their legs to a high level of tension and just kind of skipping against that level of high tension, it's just holding it on. It's kind of like waving your hand near a candle. You're like, okay, yeah, that feels pretty warm, versus holding it right on the candle and just burning the mother living hell out of your hand. You're doing the same thing with your muscles. You're burning them out, maximized for a lot longer time. So even if it's a 10-second hold, that's 10 seconds of holding at a high level of tension, which may be much more even in high rep training. Plus, you have the advantage of overcoming isometrics where force and resistance is always equal. So the more you push, the more resistance you have. But it's kind of like a drop set. If you have your muscles getting tired because you're using up those energy substrates, the amount of force you can generate goes down, but the resistance always matches it perfectly. So instead of with dynamic exercise, you only do the exercise as long as you can do the movement. So you do like 10 repetitions, and then you have to stop because you can't continue to generate enough tension to continue doing repetitions. But with overcoming isometrics, you keep going and going and going. So yes, the amount of tension is going down, but the amount of time and the amount of drain on those fuel substrates in your muscle continues going and going and going and going. So overall, you're using a lot more energy, plus you're generating a lot more tension, which means you're getting the best of both worlds. That's all fine and good, but what about this recovery thing? Now, oftentimes when I give people overcoming isometrics, I'm met with one of two responses. One is, this is great, I'm really working hard, but it doesn't beat me up nearly as much. Great, awesome, wonderful. I still feel relatively fresh. I'm not feeling worn down. I'm not exhausted and sore the next day. Fantastic. Or some people say, I'm not worn down, I'm not as sore and exhausted the next day. This sucks. Usually because we've often associated the correlation between fatigue and exhaustion and soreness with an effective workout. However, what if that type of beat and wear and tear on the body wasn't really all that important for helping you build muscle and strength, but was just a byproduct of the exercise methods that you're using? This is the point I'm trying to make, is what if the stimulus that you're looking for building muscle, all it needs to do is high tension and high time, and that's it. All of the other wear and tear and energy and exhaustion and stuff we have is not at all associated with really developing the body. It's just the wear and tear we have from high stress activity that we've been doing to cause that same thing. But what if that wear and tear is holding you back from even pushing you that hard? This may be the biggest magic, if you will, or advantage of overcoming isometrics. No, it doesn't beat you up nearly as much. No, it doesn't make you feel as sore and exhausted and stuff the next day. And while some people may see that as a bad thing, one of the things we do have to recognize is a lot of people don't get the results they want because they don't recover very well. They don't get very good sleep, they don't have very good diet, and they don't wait nearly as long as they should in between workouts to come back stronger. As a consequence, they beat themselves up, they don't go through supercompensation, which is where your body actually gets stronger and bigger, and they just keep throttling themselves into the ground. But with overcoming isometrics, if you don't beat yourself up nearly as much, you don't need nearly as much recovery or perfect recovery. So you've created a greater stimulus for strength by having more tension, a greater stimulus for hypertrophy by creating more of that tension for much longer periods of time, and you can recover a fraction of the time left. So you combine all three of those things together, and you're wondering, it's like, how is this not the greatest training method that we're not all using? Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that this is the only thing we should ever do, because there is advantage to dynamic movement, specifically if you want to improve your functional ability to do that thing. Like, you're not gonna get good at pull-ups unless you're doing actual pull-ups. Specificity for functional ability is still key. But we have to keep in mind, do you want to get good at doing the exercise, or do you just want to make your muscles bigger and stronger? There is a difference between the two. And if building muscle and strength is one of your primary objectives, including overcoming isometrics into your dynamic work may be the ticket you've been looking for to really take things to the next level, especially when you consider it takes a fraction of the time, it's really easy to implement, and it allows your muscles to work a lot harder and longer with a fraction of the wear and tear on your systems. Okay, I know I'm just barely scratching the surface on this whole overcoming isometric thing. If you want to learn more, check out my book, Overcoming Isometrics, of course. Link is down below in the description. Thoughts and questions down below in the comments, always welcome as well. Love to hear your thoughts and your experience if you have been using overcoming isometrics in your workouts as well. Thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it as always. Be fit, live free.